Hello, we're here presenting to IOSH Staffordshire today. Really looking forward to meeting all the members and sharing some useful information with regards to Legionella control.
And so we're very proud to have, I say an old friend, but certainly Ashley's been along to the, I left the old. So Ashley's been along to the branch before and delivered a fantastic presentation on Legionella. So I'm very happy that Judith and Ashley have been kind enough to give you time tonight to come along. And please ask that you put your hands together for Ashley who's going to present. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. Evening. Does this thing go? Snap around with a loud voice. Ashley Richardson, Technical Director for Qube Environmental. And tonight we're going to have to present on back to basics. So forgive me for anybody who knows about this, but sometimes it pays to go right back to the beginning. So you make sure, excuse me, when you're comprehending the risk of this, the hazard exists. It's now how you deal with it. And in terms of what we look at, competency in assessing a water system, well, it's just water, isn't it? It's just water. If only you could weaponise it, you could grow some wonderful bacteria. It's dead easy. Well, yeah, so there you go. So, that's my motto. Because it's true. The only stupid question is the one you don't ask, you don't know the answer to. So I'm happy to field questions at the end of it, unless of course you want to go on all night long, in which case just throw and we'll have a large debate. But otherwise, it's the one that goes unasked. Because we're going to live in ignorance. And I'm getting in the wrong place, because this isn't my little key.
Just use the wheel top.
Just the wheel. There we go. Water. So, naturally occurring water sources. Not one of you would go and drink out of them, would you? No?
I don't know.
It depends.
No, you're more worried about where the sheep have been, right? Because where they are is not where you're going to be drinking from. But Legionella is a naturally occurring bacteria. It exists in natural watercourses. It is an asexual being, which means you only need one. One become two, two become four, four become eight, and so forth. However, nature, in its infinite wisdom, keeps us and it basically apart, all the way up to 1976. Naturally occurring conditions for Legionella growth. Well, everybody been for a swim in the UK? It's cold, isn't it? Give away the phrase, cold water. It's good for your domestic systems because bacteria do not proliferate at below 20 degrees. They're dormant. So what we don't get in nature is mass proliferation of this bacteria. You get small occurring colonies, but not huge proliferations. Then of course, oh, come on. Somebody tell me where this is. Come on, help. I help you, you help me. There you go, now I found it. No, it's alright. Okay, forget it. I'll get through it.
It's alright.
We move water into man-made water systems. So we take naturally occurring water sources, reservoir, process it, and send it out to a tap, locally available right near you. So do you think that means it's bacterially clean?
No.
Potable water sources? Sterile? No. There's still the risk. The only way you could do that is if you, in theory, chlorinated that water or undertook other treatments to the point where you would not be able to drink it. So there's the risk that drinking water delivered to your site potentially can contain an amount of bacteria. It won't be massive. Might just be one or two. But we then give it the perfect conditions for growth. In your building, your air conditioning systems are set to roughly what temperature? Because you don't like walking in and finding it to be 13 degrees in the middle of winter, do you? So, a building will have a typical internal temperature sitting at 20, 21 degrees would be nice, wouldn't it? Everybody be comfortable. Excuse me. And that's it. Does heat rise? And where do we put all our pipework?
Down below.
Well, you're either running it next to your heating pipes or you're sticking it in a loft space where it gets warm. So we can end up achieving, just in a domestic system, positions around your site where your water will achieve between 20 and typically 45 degrees. Anybody still operating systems with tanks?
Some schools have still got
Most schools still will have. It's costing money to change systems. So we can then store water. And of course, it's all used at least once a day, isn't it? The whole tank is turned over on a daily basis, because that's what RAS says, that if you install a tank, according to the water regs, you should be storing no more water than you would use in one day. So the last place I went into that got 12 employees and 20,000 litres of stored water was not turning it over in a day if they spent their entire working day flushing the toilet. Risk. Tanks are risks. Water in pipe work is risk. The next thing we need, once we've got that, PS, how warm are we?
37.
So when you start considering what this is, it's a naturally occurring bacteria that you only need a couple of, that if you get it to the right temperature, it's the right temperature for growth. That's me. And then you feed it. For those of you who have never had the fun of cutting pipework apart, when you cut a pipe open, you will find scale and biofilm, slime, otherwise known as food. So we've got a potential water system that may contain Legionella bacteria. We've got water systems that do contain food, and we can achieve temperatures that are suitable for bacterial growth and proliferation. This is just a home, by the way, I'm not talking about work yet. It's the same in your home as it is at work. These are conditions that occur in man-made water systems. Excuse me. Everybody go on holiday? Yeah. Back off holiday, 2 weeks. Better than that, I tell you what, take a nice 2-week holiday. Come back, ignore these things, get a glass out your cupboard, walk into your kitchen, and the first thing you do, very gently just fill the glass from the tap, put it on the side, and then tell me whether you want to drink it. It's been in your water system for 2 weeks. It mains cold water supplied, but it's sat in your pipework for 2 weeks. It will not taste nice. Don't have a shower. Don't run the shower to start with, because the water then has been sitting in your pipework for 2 weeks. So everybody who has a risk assessment, do you have any low flow positions on your site? And if so, what does your risk assessment say about a low flow position? A position on site that is infrequently used, not in daily use.
should be flushed.
Flushed
Flushed
weekly. Typically 5 days or more, put it on a flushing regime. So we're into stagnant water. It's had time to stand. Does everybody know what an aerosol is? So if I all ask you to give me a dictionary definition of an aerosol, you'll all be fine, yeah? Does everybody know what an aerosol occurs? When you break the surface tension of water. The moment you do that, you will produce a droplet. It becomes that sphere. And it's not the ones you can see that you're worried about. So for those of you who've ever met me, I always say to you, just wonder how clean your toothbrush is. Today I'm going to show you just how clean your toothbrush is.
For our experiment, we needed a bathroom with a toilet and a toothbrush. A sweet, innocent toothbrush, unaware of the monstrosity that might be inflicted on it in any moment. Sorry, clearly carried away there. So that's the easy part. But how on earth are we going to prove the science? With ultraviolet light, that's how. We put ultraviolet dye down the toilet, allowing us to monitor any toilet water movement, and turned our bathroom into a disco toilet. The first part of the theory is that a toilet will spray droplets of water into the air. But how far? We lay out markers in the bathroom at intervals of 1 foot, all the way up to 6 feet, where we placed our toothbrush. But we also needed a flusher, and this chap's taking no chances. So it's time to flush in 3, 2, 1. Filmed in slow motion with ultraviolet light, you can see that simply flushing a toilet can fling water droplets over 2 feet away. But it hasn't reached our toothbrush 6 feet away. Or has it? What about the microscopic aerosolized droplets we can't see with the naked eye? Well, that can be solved by using dry ice to see them. This cloudy spray provides a visual backdrop, so the tiny droplets we missed before can hide no more. Combined with the UV light and high-speed camera, we capture the movement of the aerosolized water droplets through the air. But will they reach the toothbrush 6 feet away? It took no time at all to notice droplets above the toilet, and as our man in the suit moved the dry ice further away, slowly but surely we observed them spreading through the room. Finally, after an hour and 49 minutes, we recorded water full of toilet germs around the toothbrush. Proof that airborne bacteria from a toilet can reach a toothbrush 6 feet away. So next time you brush your teeth, have a think about what might also be on those bristles.
Please welcome Mehmet.
It's worth shutting the lid.
Back to what your gran used to say, keep your toothbrush in a cupboard and always put the lid down. So, everybody knew that about aerosols, didn't you? That's an aerosol. So your perception of risk is dependent now on what? I've just proved to you that if you flush a toilet, you produce aerosol. You open a tap, you produce aerosol. So back to practicalities, if you have a totally deficient immune system, how close to a toilet do you want to be? You don't. There are currently hospitals where those with totally deficient immune systems are in water-free environments. And they're still contracting illness, not necessarily Legionella, but water-based pathogens. Because then they start looking at, actually, how did they get their drinking water? Well, it was a jug next to a waste disposal unit for food. And every time somebody hit the button, the waste disposal unit spins, produces aerosol that's full of bacteria because it's rotting food in the bottom of it, and it lands in the jug of water that's 3 feet away. So, any process that breaks the surface tension of water will produce an aerosol. And we now have to reasonably consider the extent of that when we're examining what's on a site. The bit you have to appreciate, if it's contaminated with Legionella bacteria, that microscopic aerosol, as it dries out, the bacteria does not die instantly. There is a timeline that it will sit there, airborne, as a nuclei containing a bacteria that you're still capable of breathing in, and the more or less healthy you are, as it were, in terms of your immune system, the more likely you are to contract. So, are we still basic enough? Everybody getting it? That's it. So until 1976, this was a previously unknown issue. Until a certain cooling tower in a certain hotel full of the American Legion went pear-shaped. And an awful lot of them died as a result. It took 12 months to find out what it was. And we now call it Legionnaire's disease. But it is a potentially fatal form of pneumonia. It does also come in other guises, which will result in everything from headache, bit of delirium, slightly elevated temperature, not feeling brilliant. To all the ladies in the room, we men call it man flu. And we feel rough, but we soldier on. To the worst case scenarios of Legionella pneumophila, serogroups 1 and 2, where if you're not treated correctly, give you 72 hours plus, and you'll never be the same again if you don't end up in a box. Okay? So your systems that you view on site, if you've got a shower, you've got risk. If you've got aerators on the underside of your taps, they should be cleaned, descaled, disinfected, and maintained scale-free. Not as we quite frequently see with little stalactites hanging down off of them full of scale. Okay? So, take a look around the room and point at the person you think that's most at risk. 3 degrees. Is that me feeding? Is that me feeding back? Oh, an electric personality, I touch IT, it breaks. So go on. Who do you think in the room? I am.
And slightly over the age of 45.
And the bit I don't wear as a label on my head is I'm COPD. I have a deficient lungs. They're knackered, excuse my French. As a smoker, having worked in high silica environments, having been exposed to asbestos as a YTS, I'm COPD. I am an at-risk individual. Fill a room full of people like me, don't turn on the shower. So when you look at your risk assessment and you assess the demographic on your site, you of course take into account the bits you don't know, don't you? The standard says you can undertake your risk assessments yourself if you believe yourself to be competent. And as I'm sure everybody in this room knows, competency is about the hardest thing you can measure. Because you can have all the bits of paper you like in the world and still not be a realist. Yeah. So, for those of you who think this stuff doesn't happen, it does. It's on the increase. So that tells us one of two things. We've either opened Pandora's box and we're now looking at things that we didn't look at before and we haven't quite worked out yet how to deal with it, or people aren't doing what they need to do. Systems are getting older. Facility management is a cost and people aren't managing it. They can tick boxes all day long, but if you've got a cold water storage tank with no lid and 3 dead pigeons in it, it's not good. So I thought I was laughing last night. Everybody laughed. Oh, this is simple, right? Last time I went picking on individual businesses and just didn't name them, so it was quite entertaining. So, especially when every one of those sites that I walked into said that they had a perfectly safe system. That we don't need to do a new risk assessment because we've got one. So define significant change. Regular review. These are things in this room, everybody should understand those phrases. And if you don't, feel free to ask me a question afterwards, and we can go in what should be a regular review. And when the only competent person who actually knows what they're talking about on site leaves, that is a significant change. When you change what you do as a business. We're talking domestic systems at the moment. You know, you've got hot and cold water that comes out of taps at the sink, the wash hand basin. Anybody got emergency showers on site? Low flow positions, rarely used, or do you make somebody flush them on a weekly basis to prove their work? So they're on your flushing regimes. Do you make them take the shower heads off so you reduce the risk of exposure to aerosol?
No.
There you go. And if they're fed from a big cold water storage tank that's sitting at the top there so that it's never interrupted by the mains to make sure you've got it, even worse. But of course, if you're barbecuing somebody, it's a lot easier to give them antibiotics than trying to resuscitate a piece of burnt meat. So the risk of fire always outweighs the risk of Legionella. So please, anybody who gets told, change your water-based suppression systems because, no, manage your water-based suppression systems. Biggest risk then is your insurance testing. Proof of pumps. Because you're going to open it up, drop the pressure, have the pumps run, and if you're standing right next to a 3-inch piece of 22mm copper, it's going to spray. Stick it on a nice big long wide hose and let it disperse. So, mortality rate. Typically 10% and above. So if 100 of you in a room catch it, 10 of you are going to die. It's not good odds, is it? It's not. However, if we're in the case of an outbreak, every single person who presents at hospital with typical symptoms atypical to Legionella will be tested genetically to evidence whether or not there's Legionella there, and you'll get your specific dose of antibiotics very quickly. And hopefully that's enough. But it doesn't mean that you'll be running a marathon at the end of the year. This stuff's really bad for you. It messes you up. Your lungs will never be the same. If your temperature has got too high, you will have potentially suffered memory loss. Or at least a reduced neural function. It's really not good. Try and make this cheerful, it's getting difficult. And I keep losing that little cursor just there. So, everybody who's got one of these will automatically perceive it as a risk, yeah? Cooling towers, because everybody in the room knows what every cooling tower looks like, don't you? Because some of them are about that big. They don't necessarily hang off the side of the building. Washing tunnels, anybody do processed metal work, paint, finishing, anything like that? Spray heads, recirculated tanks, taking stuff that's been stored outside, cleaning it before it goes off the process. And it gets warm. They can all be risks. And of course, everybody loves going to these parties, don't they? Because of course they've got no food in them. Because of course every single one of you, when you get in there, you are physically sterile, aren't you? There's no skin cells, no fecal matter, nothing else. Did you not realise that these things can become Campbell's soup if you don't look after them?
I think we found their level.
Found it, haven't I? I've come far enough down now to get a laugh. Right. So, whatever personal, physical, organic bits you want to leave behind in one of these, if they're not dosed, if they are not monitored and looked after, especially in commercial formats, they now have been given their own standard because they are of such a risk. And round here it's dead easy to express that risk, JTF. And it wasn't even physically in use. Nobody was getting in it. It was just on display. Okay? 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, and so forth. So if there's bacteria in it, if there's Legionella bacteria in it and it's viable, it will grow. It's not dead and it's not non-viable. It's a viable culture, it will grow. If you give it food, the right temperature, and time. And if then you walk past, hit the button that says, press me if you want to see the bubbles, you'll get one. Everybody understand these things then, in terms of risk? If you've got a cooling tower, you're automatically going to assume you've got risk. You'd have it on a full contract maintenance agreement. You'd never dream of telling your contractor that I don't want to pay for all of that chemical, I only want you to use half of it. I don't want you to come on your scheduled in accordance with the standard visits. I want you to halve that visit rate. Of course, if you do that, you're running a certain local authority establishment in Barrow-in-Furness, and you will kill people. There is foreseeable risk, and exposure is preventable. So, is this a substance that is hazardous to your health? Anybody got any idea what document that means it comes under? Can we control it? Yeah, we can. Now we've got away from all the specialised stuff. Simple stuff. Hot water cylinder. Where's the giveaway in the phrase? It's hot. Yeah? So define hot. What's hot? If I give you a selection of temperatures for your water from 0 to 100 degrees, where do you start calling it hot as far as the cylinder is concerned?
Above 50?
60.
60 plus degrees. You store more than 15 litres of water as a hot supply. It is above 60 degrees. Less than 15, 50, so long as turnover is inevitable on a day-to-day basis. Because literally, you open the tap to wash a cup, you'll have used half of it. That can fill back up. So, such systems, nice and easy. No, I just want to point at things, that's all. No, I don't want to roll around. If I have a ruler, I'll be asking for a set of step ladders, and then everybody will be saying, no, you've got to do a risk assessment before you can do that. So, conventional domestic gravity feed system. There's a tank above it. Water comes in, water comes out under gravity, and that's about it. That one is mains pressure. They are mains pressure. Mains comes in, fills it up. These things can de-stratify, which means you can end up with a layer in terms of temperature. So you can end up with conditions, the bigger they get, dependent on their design, you can end up with an area within a tank that supports growth. It's the right temperature. If there's scale in them, you've got food. So you can still create it, which is not a problem when it goes through up at the top, gets to 66, 70 degrees, and you're killing it straight away. But if you get an issue with your cylinder, and it's not quite operating exactly as it should do, you can tell what should be a low-risk configuration, and you can take the risk and you can elevate it. And then, of course, you can supply it to showers and spray everybody with it. It's dead easy to get it wrong, isn't it? Dead easy. Cold water storage tanks. That one is approximately 70% full. So it's running at just about 6,500 litres, and there's 7 people work on site. Daily turnover should be inevitable, should not be storing more water. Once upon a time, when there were 400 employees in that building, it was right. It's not right now. Significant change. Easily and readily accessible. That's easy and readily accessible for service and maintenance, isn't it? I can get up there easy. That's a cold water storage tank wrapped in a bit of glass fibre inside plastic. Roughly 450 litres, about 27 feet up off the deck, with a 3-foot wide gap that we got a single set of triples up on the wall, so I could literally get up there, turn around, 3 points of contact on a ladder at all times, click, and that was all I could do to it. Because I'm supposed to look inside of it to see what the condition is. At least 12 monthly. If it's out of the way, not in regular use, winter and summer inspections. When would be the best time to look at it in terms of seeing it in its best condition? Winter or summer? Winter, it's cold.
That's correct.
Summer, last summer, what temperature did we have last summer? 30 plus, 28 feet up, above 2 ovens, with an alloy roof. It was about 48 degrees up there. It was nice and warm, that tank. It really was. It was nice and warm. It had a sister tank. Oh, by the way, it's foreseeable and preventable risk, because they're there. That's one that was next door to it. This is free-floating organic growth. That's mould growing on water. Of course, it did supply a drinking supply, but I didn't have a cup of coffee, so I was fine. No, it does. It's changed now. But the original site risk assessment said there was no risk. Because the person who undertook it did not perceive the risks. Any of you who still have cold water storage tanks, the standard HSG 274 Part 2 quite clearly indicates a photographic example of how and what is acceptable. Middle of the road, and need something doing with it in about 12 months' time. Not really very pleasant right now, but you should really do something. Then it has the last line on it that says, if you see mould spotting to your tank clean with immediate effect, your obligation is to provide a system that is not suitable to harbour or allow the proliferation of bacteria. And if you've got mould growing on your tank, you are not doing that. Indicatively, the advice should be, first off, can you convert your systems to mains and get rid of your tank? And everybody, of course, will then throw the pound sign in front. Has that ever been a good enough excuse in a court of law? No? Everybody agree it's not a good enough excuse in a court of law. We really are back to basics then, aren't we? Yeah. So would you all agree? There's foreseeable risk and it's preventable. So I'm not an advocate of taking a perfectly good conventional gravity feed system and just ripping it out for no apparent reason. If it's well managed, in good condition, serving the purpose it was intended to do, is in regular use, it's turning over properly. But of course, when these kind of configurations are supplying a hot water cylinder, how many of you take a bath anymore? Showers? See? Electric showers. Supplied by mains. Not a bath supplied by a conventional hot water cylinder that you use and therefore turn over at least every 2 days, because you have a bath every 2 or 3 days, and therefore the water sitting in the tank is changed every 2 or 3 days, because most baths are slightly bigger in capacity than the cylinder that supplies them. That way you use the water, because we've changed how we use our systems at home. So you can have a tank But the only time that 120 litre cylinder is used is if you choose to wash the pots. Because your dishwasher these days is mains pressure fed only, no hot water supply, AAA rating, energy efficient. So you're heating 120 litres of water to wash 2 cups a week. But you're not turning over your cold water storage tank either, are you? And that's what happens when you don't have lids on. They get really pretty. So there were, I think it was 3 rat skeletons and a dead bird at the bottom of that as well. But you know, that's minor. The good thing is I've not put the ones on about the doctor's surgeries either. Does everybody know what one of those is? Yeah, the people who know me. Thermostatic mixer valves. So depending on the environments that you work in, it takes hot and cold supplies. Hot supply to it should be at above at least 50 degrees, because any outlet on your site should be supplied with water at least 50 degrees. The idea behind 60 and having 50 at the outlet is to enable water to move across a distance and still be at a suitable temperature hot when it gets there. So this takes hot water that side, cold water that side, and produces a blended water at approximately 39 degrees, for want of a better phrase. It really is roughly that. They can be set between 36 and 46, dependent on use, wash and basins, but where you're into full body immersion, showers or baths, you're looking at preventing a scald risk. That's what you're doing, you're preventing scalding. So does everybody understand what the risk with these is? You're blending water. Hot to cold, as in mix the two together, you can have hot at 80 degrees, everything's dead in it. Everything's dead from 70 and above, guaranteed. But mixing 70 degree water with 12 degree water, cold, does not kill what's in the cold. So extended distribution lengths of blended water produce areas of biofilm, water at the right temperature, and potentially a source of bacteria within it, and therefore a suitable condition for bacterial growth. So the standard now reads the blended supply should be as short as practicable. They should be fitted as close as is reasonably practicable to the outlet they serve. So if I've got a sink there, I want a TMB there, not over there.
Is there a maximum length?
There used to be. Said not exceeding 2 metres.
Because that's what IWS still quotes us.
And then the HSE failed to prosecute when they were at 1.85. So the standard now reads, should be fitted as close as is reasonably practicable to the outlet. So, taking that, if I put my white wig on and sat in a big chair in Crown Court, I would want to see a photo of your washout basin with a drawer and a cupboard, and I can open the cupboard door and go, so why couldn't you put one there? Why is it all the way over there? Everybody wants a number. Numbers make things easy, don't they? I can comply if I know it should be less than 2 metres. But at even 2 metres, that can be too long. So the numerical value was scrapped. Because the target is as close as is reasonably practicable. The other thing is, only where risk assessment says they're necessary to fit. So a managing director who likes soft hands, oh well, turn on the cold and the hot. I can put a sign up that says, caution, hot water. And I can give you a hot and a cold tap. Because the moment you install them, you're buying into an additional risk. And of course, you then got to service them and maintain them. So buying into the, I'm now trying to protect people from scalding, you're looking at fail-safe testing them on a periodic basis, typically every 6 months. And you're looking at servicing and maintaining it, cleaning strainers internally, descaling it and disinfecting it in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, not exceeding, of course, 12. So if you've buried it in a wall and you can't get to it, you're going to break all of those, aren't you? Yeah? So the care home that I did the other week with 70 odd rooms, with 2 of these in each room, when I went up to the inspection panel right just there, and I opened the inspection panel that is specifically designed for that, I had to put my hand in like that along the wall, and I still couldn't get to the valve. It looked right. It wasn't right. You cannot service those valves. And that particular home is for extremely vulnerable persons. Okay? So they need to be able to check these valves. They need to be able to service these valves. And seeing as it was a new build and it was coming up towards its end of contract 12 months after it's built, they penned a very nice letter to the contractor to say, can you come and please either reposition all the valves to the access panels so we can service and maintain them, or could you please move the access panels to where the TMVs are so we can please service and maintain.
Are architects told about this stuff? Because we've got new builds and they're not impossible to get to.
They weren't when they built the stud wall framework, and they built what the contractors did afterwards. Quite frequently, it really is. So somebody says, thank you for that, can we move that to there? It feels better when we move it into the room if it's there, and that's it, it's hidden. But they shouldn't be hidden. So when somebody spends £12,000 doing up a tiling job in 2¼ inch thick granite slabs and buries 4 of them underneath the washout basin, and you need a forklift truck to get it off, I don't think that's defined as easily and readily accessible for service. Showers. If you don't need a shower on site, get rid of it. You are building in risk. The definition of a low-risk system: mains fed only, wash-out basins, toilets only, no spray heads or showers, heat hot water from instantaneous or low-volume water heaters, and where daily turnover to every single outlet is guaranteed. The moment you put anything else extra on it, you're adding risk. I'm sure we've all read a document that says wherever possible, or there's a perceived risk, you should consider alternatives, substitution, or engineering out the risk. Yeah? That's what we do. Is that all I've got left?
Yes.
Whoa, right, motoring on. So, risk assess it. Do you need it? Where's it fed from? Where's it positioned? What's it made of? What's its condition? Who's using it? Who's exposed to any aerosol production? How often is it used, and what control measures are appropriate? And this is all, of course, above and beyond your monthly temperature monitoring that, of course, is all you have to do to comply. Not. Keep pressing on it as well. Do I really have to say any more? Easy pickings, Legionella. It's easy pickings. Do you have a risk assessment? Can you evidence that you've trained your staff in a suitable manner? Do you provide them with suitable resources? Please provide me with your documentary evidence to show that you undertake your statutory obligations. And if you can't, you have failed in your duty to manage. Yeah, suitable welfare. Yeah, let's get cost involved. Yeah, let's do management amendments 99. Absolute risk, absolute duty to undertake risk assessments. And then, of course, the one thing that's going to get thrown across the room at me, ACOP L8 is not law. It's not. But it is the standard to which you are judged should you find yourself in court. It is a document that's given special significance. Equal to or better than is what you should achieve. And if you're in court, I would hasten to say you've probably not done equal to or better than. Therefore, you will be found guilty. The extent of that guilt, well, you can spend money on your expensive barristers to try and mitigate it, but if you're in there, then you're there for a reason. God, that was light-hearted, wasn't it? Anybody in the room believe themselves to be the duty holder? Some man who's got a target on his back. So, you should all be aware who a duty holder is, the responsible person on site, any of their nominated deputies, and the task that they're responsible for. And that should, of course, all be clearly identified in your, would it be your risk assessment or your written scheme?
Both? Is it both?
Should be both. But of course, you all have a risk assessment and a written scheme, don't you? There's a hint there. The reason I say that is most people don't have the written scheme. Just in case those with a written scheme think everybody's the same as them, they're not. It's the bit that's normally missing. Don't get me wrong, your risk assessment forms the start of your written scheme. It should be giving you your action plans and what you need to do. So, contributory factors. HSC did some investigations and they put these bits as being the primary cause of outbreak and issue. Failure to identify risk, to put into place effective schemes of control, implement those schemes of control, keep adequate records and poor communication. And it seems to be an ongoing issue. So you can see from the breakdown, potentially outbreaks in sectors manufacturing, public services, local authorities, non-specified. Not quite sure where it came from, but you definitely had it. And that's the bit that makes interesting reading for me. What used to be perceived as the biggest risk, cooling towers, we're now at 25% based on your conventional domestic hot and cold water systems. HSG 274 Part 2, Table 2. Please read it. It tells you everything that you can have in your water system in general terms, and it tells you what you should be doing with it on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, 6-monthly or 12-monthly basis. Still not sure. But they've opened Pandora's box. They've got ways of investigating now. Test its genes, DNA it, go around swabbing taps, bits, pieces, odds and sods and see if they can find it. Sooner or later, we'll find it. And it doesn't mean that a proportion of this is from your own home. And that's what makes it difficult to find. Remembering that most things with water are retrospective, because the moment you ran the tap, the bit you had sitting in your pipes for the last 3 weeks is now gone. Doesn't mean it's impossible to find out, but it does mean it's gone at that point. The numbers are saying, if you're in manufacturing or public services, leisure's got it quite good, because you've got things like swimming pools. They're a risk, but they happily accept that they're a risk and they manage them. Anybody got air scrubbers in process? No? Wet-based air scrubbers. They're a mess, they're nasty. They're only any good as long as you use them in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. The way the manufacturer says that should be installed is exactly how it should be installed. If you try and use them as reservoirs to recover things and leave the water sitting around for weeks at a time, you've got a great big water cascade that's creating loads of aerosol that you extract. Not a good idea. So, in terms of prosecution by where the system failures were, it's 50% were still on cooling towers, so what that means is, of the cooling towers examined, those that were bad were probably bad. But the rest of it is based on failings in the domestic systems. Other bits, other parts of processed water, other bits and odds and sods. And when you start looking at what was actually going wrong, the scheme of control, or written scheme, whichever phrase you want to use, the risk assessment, so we're back to these two bits. You can have a risk assessment and not utilise it, not understand it. It sits there gathering dust. Because obviously you know better than the consultant that you pay to bring in to tell you how to do it properly, don't you? You're laughing because you know I've got some of those in my history books. Yeah, I know. Every now and then somebody tries to tell you that they know better and that their shower, their AC systems that are water-based, their adiabatic systems and others are not a risk. And the HSE quite clearly state inadequate management, lack of training and poor communications are all contributory factors to outbreaks of Legionnaire's disease. And we've not even covered high-risk scenarios yet. This is just basic systems. Design, implement, monitor, maintain effective systems and schemes of control. There's no point in taking temperatures if you don't know what the right temperature is. There's no point in asking a member of staff, have you done the temperature records this month? Yes. Great, box is ticked, there's a number filled in, and 5 months later you check it and you realise that your calorifier that should be at 60 degrees has been at 42 degrees for the last 6 months. No point. Lack of management. Standard operating procedures, general inspections should be signed off, so you should be inspecting cold water storage tanks, cooling towers. The last thing you want to do is every year inspect your cooling tower, and every year your inspection on your cooling tower says it needs cleaning. Because you should be maintaining the cooling tower in a manner that doesn't harbour bacterial growth. So if at 12 months it needs cleaning, and historically every 12 months it needs cleaning, you need to inspect it more frequently than 12 months. But that's a cost thing again, isn't it? We're back to that pound sign. Non-conformances and follow-up actions. Keep records of what you do. It's easy. Called a diary, or you write it in a corner on your risk assessment that says change this on this day. Because that gives you your audit trail, that gives you evidence. So you do all appreciate, don't you, that without your evidence on site, you are not doing it. Even if you stand there and say, honestly, would you? I did. You didn't if you've not got a documented evidence. Because I know there's a camera on, I'm not allowed to give you the exact definition of PPM, but it's something poor management, right? And if it's that bad, it shouldn't be. The responsible person is exactly that. The responsible person. You delegate it, you don't abdicate it. There is now quite a close link, and has been for quite a while now, with the Legionella Control Association and the HSE. They both sit on bodies together, talk to each other, try to understand how both sides of the coin work. But that's what they're after. They're now after a common goal. Did it say? You don't have to look far. Nobody got in it. That doesn't mean somebody didn't spit in it. That doesn't mean somebody didn't drop half a hot dog from the chuck wagon outside in it. But it doesn't take much to get it wrong. Now, for those of you who are fairly good at reading, unlike me, I work with hammers and spanners and bits. If a member of your staff attends hospital displaying symptoms that were potentially considered to be those of a serious case of pneumonia or a heavy chest infection, and you've got a rather keen attender at hospital, otherwise known as a doctor these days, I think they're still called doctors, and he hits the button on Riddle that says there's a potential Legionella issue here, you will have a lot of bright yellow jackets at your door on Monday morning. And behind them will be two guys, otherwise known as police, who are there to arrest you should you try and stop the guys in the big yellow jackets looking at what they want to look at. And when they don't find what they want to see, that would be your risk assessment, suitable procedures, a written scheme, your monitoring, your control, your actions and responsibilities, who's done what, where, and how things should have been done. And when you haven't got that, they are now in a position where they can fine you for about 5% of your turnover for your failings in your duty to manage. And there was no Legionella. The gentleman concerned had a chest infection, but it wasn't Legionella. But it was the reason to attend your site. That's what it takes. You know, you can only be told so many times before you lose your business. It's the truth. You can only be told so many times before you will go out of business. Get it wrong, carry on getting it wrong, you're out of business. 3 minutes for questions. Sorry? Yeah. So it's whether or not you want to do questions now, after, or whatever. No?
Just point out, this is the biggest offender of Legionnaires' disease back in 1985, less than a mile away from
Oh, you know what, I don't like very much Stafford Hospital. I don't. But when you construct it, stick an air conditioning unit straight over the cancer wards, leave the window open, pump it back down, you will kill people because they've got no immune system. Hey, it was a great place to move our business.
Talking about immune systems, aren't males more prone than females?
They are indeed, technically, and also if you're a marathon runner as well. Because you could be exceptionally fit to the point where your body's immune system is more interested in dealing with fixing how much damage you've caused to your muscles rather than fighting off any form of infection. So anybody who knows a marathon runner, go near them when you've got a cold and watch them run away. Because you will, with a common cold, you put them on their back for 2 weeks. Because they are so physically stressed. They have caused damage to get to that level of fitness. Anything else?
I've got a couple of questions.
Cool.
Yeah.
Greedy.
Cool. And on the one slide where you showed the dreads and on the pie, you said something that they couldn't trace where it was from.
Yeah, environmentally acquired.
Yeah, because I did come to the last one. I'm sure you said the story that they could trace back to where the one
If
was
they can
from.
find the source,
Yeah.
that's the problem. You can DNA it now, right? So you can do a genome on the particular bacteria that's in your chest. Now, as long as you can then go and find where you were exposed,
To their work or their house or wherever.
yeah, so they go around and they come back and they go, you know what, right now,
I'm
which
sure you said this story before, it travelled through the air and what was like.
it will, let's put it this way, you put it in a cooling tower, right, so let's have a contaminated cooling tower in the middle of London. For instance, it is only an example, 16 stories up hanging off the side of a building. It's 26 years old, 27 years old, the drift eliminators have rotted away, it's not been looked at, serviced or maintained, and the automatic dosing system goes pear-shaped. Now when the fan blows and it's blowing air through and it's picking up aerosol and it's blowing it out, how far across London do you think it will go?
Miles, altitude, depending.
16 stories up, with an average daily gust in the corner, it's going a long, long way. Quite easily 2 or 3 miles. Depending on atmospheric condition, wind, all the rest of it will depend where it settles. Remembering microscopic droplets of water.
But isn't it also about footfall? Wasn't there a situation in, was it droplets on
Yes.
a busy pedestrian
Yes.
area between the bus
So literally,
and the shopping centre.
falling distance was nowhere.
Okay.
Literally coming straight out. So if there'd been nobody there, that lovely death triangle, you know, contaminated aerosol, people breathing. If you breathe in aerosols that are contaminated, you're going to cop it technically. So if you remove the people from the equation, nobody's catching it. So literally, if it's a short distance football, as in short distance ball for the aerosol, and you're walking there, yes, that's where you're going to get it from.
There's one question I was going to ask you last time, and it bugged me until
Am I a
now.
reoffender or are you then? Which is it?
Steam cleaners.
Steam cleaners.
I think if you say put hands up in the room, how many people have got them home? I'd say a vast majority. And how often they sit around, how often the hose is used on that.
So let's start with a classification in terms of criteria. Steam or jet wash.
Both.
Well, steam, how do you generate steam?
Heat.
What temperature did you take water to generate steam? Proper steam. 100 degrees. So is it over 70? So in theory, what's in the pot is dead. Now, jet wash,
Cavitation.
warm day, rainwater butt outside. Certain ones tell you that now you can stick a hose pipe in them and produce an awful lot of aerosol. It might not just be Legionella you would be worried about then inside that water butt that's sitting outside.
It was just that when you raised about that red area,
Yeah.
and that's what made me think about it, because the amount of people have got them, the amount of people they are at home, and how often they're used.
Conventional hose pipes are a risk. Leave them charged, hanging on the back of your house, filled with water, warming up on the sun-facing side of your property for 2 weeks before you decide to get water.
But there's a lack of knowledge or understanding of that side of it. That's what I was trying to get at.
So back to my initial point, obviously you can be anyone, according to the standard, can undertake their risk assessments so long as you are competent. And competency is still, as far as I'm concerned, the hardest thing to measure.
Ashley, can I ask a question, please?
Push comes down.
I'm getting with high-risk businesses and food manufacturing, I understand all of that. Where I struggle is, do you have to think of it that it's all employers need Legionella surveys? For example, if they've got no stored water, it's main spent,
They've got water in pipes.
and they've got just hand basins, a really low-risk system, do they still need a Legionella survey?
In principle, Health and Safety at Work Act, Management Amendments, 1999, where there is a perceived risk, there is an absolute duty to undertake a risk assessment, and it must be suitable and sufficient. So if the person undertaking it can identify thermostatic mixer valves, aerators, dead legs, low flow positions, what are the right temperatures for everything to be done, they can do their own. But if they have no comprehension of what a water system is, a piece of paper that says Legionella risk assessment, we don't have a risk because we don't have any stored water, and you and I know we've had those conversations where clients say we have no stored water. But then I go and visit and go, and these 3 toilet block areas, do you use them on a daily basis? No. So they're all dead legs then, and there's about 70 metres of pipe work there, both hot and cold, that is stagnant. So is that a risk? Around the room, that is a risk. It's a risk of proliferation within your system. So in my opinion, yes, they shouldn't be expensive things if they're very simple systems, but to try and explain to somebody that they have these pieces of kit, these assets, and this is what you need to do to these assets to show that you comply. If they won't listen to that, that's why they're probably not our clients.
Yeah.
I've got one.
Sorry,
Where are we going?
ladies first.
Mine's more about audit trails. And I picked up have a situation where we have external contractors for some of our client schools who come and do monthly temperature monitoring. There used to be a lovely little chap who brought last year's records when he came the next time to do the testing. So there was a system, paper-based, of the paperwork arriving. That's fallen down because said little chappie is gone. So what I'm finding in audits is that I'm missing anything up to 6 months' worth. I have not got temperature records on site. My client schools are blindly telling me, I've got a contract, and I'm saying, well, that ain't working. You've got no evidence. As far as I'm concerned, you're not doing it. I'm slashing your audit score. And I'm presuming Mr. HSE man would be of the same opinion.
Oh, you and him would be standing right next to each other.
Right, good.
You'd be singing off the same hymn
I'm
sheet.
being a cow and...
Yeah, no, bring it on. Put the horns on.
Excellent.
Go in, pull in the charm shop. That's me, I got called arrogant.
I'm doing very nicely.
No, I got called arrogant and dismissive the other week because I actually asked somebody for, can you please evidence your records? Well, that's arrogant. Actually, no, I'm a consultancy and you're paying me to audit and review your site. Can you please show me your records? Well, it doesn't work. What doesn't? The water heater. Well, it does. I've just got it to work. It actually fully complies. So when was the last time you actually checked it? I've not done it for months. I don't like your attitude. I'm going to report you to my boss. You're making me feel under pressure.
Sorry for saying that, Ashley.
What's new? And that, there you go. I'm being paid to go in to examine their process and their procedure. When I then actually pulled out the year before records, I turned around and said, did you not have a summer here? And the person looked at me and she said, I do not understand what you mean. I said, because I really want to know where you were getting mains cold water from in August at 7 degrees. Well, it's always 7 degrees. Not last year it was. So, for an auditor, when you go in and doing review, management review, or audits, water is actually quite simple. Most of the time it's actually quite simple to work out that the person who's filling out the paperwork that's fabricating information, that didn't say fraud, did it? Because that's what it is. They're committing an act of fraud. So when they fabricate information or treat it purely as a tick box exercise and just put the same numbers in as last week, normally it's a lack of training and a lack of understanding of the reason and responsibilities that they're carrying when they're doing it. In terms of contractually speaking, any business that is involved in a contract is exactly that. And if it says you should have access to those records at either an instant notice, as in portal, log on, and be able to get to it. If you portal, log on, and they're not there, they're in breach of their contract. And you're commissioning them to carry out a service for you. Examine your contract, find a new contractor.
Just a quick one. So we've got an electronic portal system, and you see for all the different sites we can view all the observations and non-conformances. But sometimes it's your responsibility to close up non-conformances or observations on.
Didn't say it's not. When it's done as a portal system and it says calorifier at incorrect temperature, 42 degrees, it's the client's responsibility to put that right. But if your portal or a portal does not have information on it that the client's paying for, then that portal is wrong.
Well, I'm trying to understand, because sometimes it's difficult to make a decision if you're not competent to understand how to close up non-conformance off and observations. Because I think one of the issues that I had in the past is it's something to do with the temperature outside, that you could physically close off that non-conformance because there was obviously a change of temperature.
The issue was different, no records.
Which I understand, but I'm just thinking, even with Legionella, when you had that responsibility of closing up non-conformance and observations, sometimes it's difficult to understand how to close them up as well, I think.
You should be guide, you should have advice, it's the one to do.
Not necessarily, because all the temperatures could be different, and it could be different temperatures of outside and things. I just find it very difficult to sometimes understand if you've closed that off correctly or not.
But this is where you're using competent contractors to undertake the works. Not only should you say, this is the problem, if you're being paid as a consultant stroke advisory, this is the problem, these are the advised guidances on resolution. Now, calorifier, too low, adjust or repair. There you go. It's then the client's responsibility to ensure that those works are undertaken. When the individual goes back next month, they should be checking that again, and if it's still the same, it should escalate the level of issue because it's a lack of management in the first place. What my colleague's statement was that there are no records. And in audit process, if I log on or I walk into a client and they say, we utilise this company A, and they provide us with a portal, I say, do you have your portal log on? Yes. Please log on and evidence to me the monthly temperatures, the TMV servicing, and the quarterly shower cleans and annual cold water storage tank inspections that should be undertaken on your site. And if the client goes onto their portal and sits there going, June, May, April, February, you know what, I can't find them for 6 months, they're not on there. It isn't, that's not a portal issue, that's that the contractor that you're using hasn't done their job and put them on. And as a client, you're paying somebody to manage your records for you. You know that phrase I used, PPM, management? Well, they are doing it badly there, but you have also been doing it badly and purely assuming that because you're paying them, it's being done. It is still your responsibility to ensure that these things are undertaken and available. Make sense? Anything else?
Mine's more of a comment rather than a question. I'm sure I read recently that there was the first proven case of human-to-human spread of Legionnaires in Spain. It's a medical journal.
Yes.
And if that is the case, it's a greater public health risk than ever first imagined.
Was that the son, mother to the son?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know any more of that?
Not other than probably what you and I have both read, which is person-to-person close contact, oral, in terms of family kiss, stroke, issue with health, trying to keep them breathing type things. If it gets to that point, the ACOP will be so far out of date the day they prove that, we are all in trouble if that's the case. It's the only one that's ever been suggested, and at the moment there's not statistical evaluation of evidence that it's correct, but it's suggested and it's up under consideration. They do appreciate now that there are that Pandora's box bit that I was talking about, the levels of exposure, the level of aerosol that can cause damage or issue is person dependent.
They now have neonates, don't they?
Neonates.
Newborn babies, and they're born in, unfortunately born in birthing pools. Can also contract Legionnaires.
Birthing pools have resulted in Legionella deaths. So, because consider the first breath of a newborn baby underwater. So if the pool water is contaminated, that's exactly what those very young, infant lungs taking their first breath with a child with absolutely, now, right at that point, zero immune system, because its immune system has been purely dependent on his blood. Sorry, Chris.
I was going to say, some years back, more recently I suppose, looking at the media, there have been a number of really serious burns and fatal burns to those people that are in care, the old,
yes.
those in need. From what you've said, I sort of hung on a few points of, you're talking about management of TMVs, location of systems and checking points. I suppose that is an unfortunate added extra into the mix, as well as this.
Today's statement was back to basics. Yeah, that's it. Back to basics. This is the basics. Now, if you want to start talking healthcare, start considering HTMI4, totally safe water systems, which involve everybody from the groundsman and upwards, your architects. It's all about design. It's all, as you said, architects, shouldn't they design this in? Yes, they should. All fixed pipe work, no flexes, because EDPM fakes, counterfeits are basically made of natural rubber and charcoal, which are two perfect foods for growing Legionella. So inside a flexible pipe that you use off your TMV up to your tap, if it's a fake and it's not a real RAS one, and even EDPM has been found to harbour and potentially allow bacterial growth, but where they're fakes, it's natural rubber and charcoal, which is organics and carbon, and it's the best food. It's exactly how you grow it in the lab. You take an agar plate and you ram it full of crushed carbon, smear the bacteria on it, stick it in an incubator at 37 degrees, and see how many of them you can grow.
Do you know last year, do you know when we had obviously that extreme temperatures? Obviously some of the schools were actually reporting that the cold water was way high. Isn't that an issue?
It is now, technically.
Because you can't run it and cool it down, because it's coming out at the same temperature.
Well, in principle, main supplies were still static at about 2021. What it means is it evidences that your school holds more water in pipework than they thought they did. Or you've got cold water storage tanks that are not turning over. Now, part of this is that if you've got elevated temperature and you know you've got food, the one thing you don't want to then give it is time. So what was a weekly flushing regime for the odd low flow bit should now be extended to being a weekly flushing regime to ensure that all outlets are in regular use. And you should have been able to maintain your school temperatures about 21, 22. In real terms, it starts really becoming an issue over 25, but the standard says less than 20. But really, you're starting to kick its backside and ask it to grow when you go above 25. So the idea is, if you could then increase your weekly flushing regimes, and rather than just being the big taps on either end, start actually walking from one end of the school to the other, and letting it run. And the next thing somebody throws at me, we've had one client who did it, who said, I haven't got the staff for that. I said, that's weird, because every time we come to do your flushing regime, there's 3 of them sitting in the canteen drinking tea. So when they go around and close doors, have them walk in and run the taps. Move some water. There is nothing about managing your water system that, in theory, 90-odd% of it you should be able to manage. Resource is always an issue, and we fully appreciate that.
Do you think, going back to your thing about the design phase, do you think the designers have the good understanding of the Legionnaires or the residual risk at the end of it?
When we're talking about basic domestic systems, 9 times out of 10, the failings are by persons who have undergone suitable qualifications to be plumbers. They're not fitting things in accordance with RAS. But you as the client, you know, you're penny proud, pound shy. Plumber comes in and says, you know what, I fixed 6 TMVs there, they're 130 quid each. If you want decent ones, by the time I finish plumbing them in, plus isolation valves, you're paying 200 quid a barrel. And you say, can you fit me 2? I don't want one as close as is reasonably practicable to the outlet it serves. Can you put me 1 in and serve 4 wash houses? Can I then go from having a 300mm length of blended pipework to 1.4 metres because it goes up there and comes across it, and this one might not be in regular use? Or then, can you do me a favour, can you put me a cold tap on there as well, which of course is completely pointless when you've got a blended supply to the hot, because who uses a cold tap when the hot tap is absolutely the right temperature for you to wash your hands with? Especially when you put the sign up that says, this is not drinking water. So design is one of those things. It's what do you want, what do you need. What you need is not always what you want. Sometimes what you want is definitely not what you need. Anybody else? An exhausted, oh, I thought I'd exhausted the room then.
I've got Paul on this on an audit. Vehicles, we've got fleet vehicles.
Yes.
Vehicles, water bottles.
Yes.
Raised a question whether about Legionnaire, risk assessment in that case. You know, I if I'm honest, I sort of, pushed it at that point. I didn't think it was, a particular risk really in active vehicles.
Dependent on size, system and use. If you say that you utilise a washing agent for your screens which has an inbuilt detergent which is also happens to be an antibacterial, then you'd be doing something about it. The amount of aerosol produced in terms of the cab driver when he's doing it, no. There are a bit other issues, caravans, stored water, small volumes but left alone, certain welfare type units doing the same thing, sitting there for weeks, not in use with very small capacity and then making an amount of aerosol and spray. So if your fleet regime had top up with fresh on a 3-daily basis or in use basis, then you'd really be covering that turnover basis. So it wouldn't be one specifically that you'd be walking into. It's not to say it's not possible.
Has anybody ever heard of it though? I mean
Personally, I haven't. No, not as
my point. I mean, I've been driving for years and cars.
If you went back 2 years ago, nobody would have told you that a WC was that much of a risk. But now we know by certain hospitals that might not be a risk in terms of Legionella, but in terms of pathogen transfer, they are.
Where do you work? Whereabouts?
We're still recording.
Turn
Turn it off.
No, sorry, I mean what area? Because there was a case in Birmingham where the...
Okay, so we've just finished our presentation to IOSH Staffordshire. Had a fantastic response, really good feedback and lots of questions, so we're really happy, and yeah, people said we did a good presentation, so really pleased.